Good evening. We are so excited to be here tonight. We are so appreciative of this fantastic panel that has decided to use some of their personal time to be here with us today from different places around the country. And thank you, Dawn, for moderating today's panel. We're really excited about the conversation we are about to have. My name is Daniel Pasco. I'm Associate Provost for Immersive Learning and Career Design at Drew University, and I am thrilled to be co-leading an approach to undergraduate education called Launch. So I'll spend just about 4 or 5 minutes talking to you about not only Launch, but how that connects with the program that we're experiencing today, just so that we gain some context and we are aware of the opportunities that that we're making available through Launch. And then of course, we'll follow up with the panel. We have some prepared questions. Then after that, we'll open it up for questions from the audience for us to engage in a conversation. So let me start just briefly talking a little bit about Launch. Just know that Launch is the curriculum of our first year students from last year and this year. So we have 2 classes already going through the Launch experience. In a couple more years, we'll have all students in the College of Liberal Arts going through the Launch curriculum. Launch has 3 goals. One is to help students identify a purpose at a time when, according to Gallup, 87% of the world's workforce is struggling to find meaning in what they do. It's a very important goal that we're trying to achieve. The second goal is preparing students for their careers at a time when we're expecting them to transition 11.9 times in their trajectories. At a time when we're expecting that 86% of the careers they'll have are careers that don't exist yet. So we're really trying to prepare them for unprecedented times. And that is another very important focus, their career preparation. And the third one is to prepare them for their impact in the community and the world, which I don't think that I need to mention any data. We all notice that we are dealing with systemic crises, not only locally, but nationally and globally. And that unfortunately, these are issues that are affecting all of us, including our students, and we need to work together to solve them. So purpose, career, and impact, are very intentional goals that we have for the Launch effort. Now, if you scroll down, you'll notice that we have a website or a platform called Launchpad at launch.drew.edu. And if you scroll down, there is a little map that tries to describe a little bit of what Launch is, because Launch comes to life through 7 what we call high impact practices. One of them is a course that in their second semester, or at least most of them, and some might take it a semester afterwards, through which we introduce all students to Launch and we engage students in all things Launch. To give you an idea, that particular course is connected with, is connected with an e-portfolio called the Launch Plan that allows them to keep a record of their progress and keep learning artifacts and reflect about their development. You can also see here the curriculum of the course and how they go through a process of learning more about themselves, their purpose, their identity, what are the community and world needs that matter to them, to identify possible paths, and then to engage in communities and with mentors and experiences to identify what is expected from their paths that they have selected and develop an action plan. So those are these 2 components that you see here. The gears are the course, the Launch Plan is the e-portfolio. Another curricular component is immersive experiences. We have students complete certain criteria that cross all types of immersive experiences. We have 6 of them, from undergrad research to treks and study abroad to community-based learning, internships, on-campus employment, student leadership. And then students do 2 of them to complete their curriculum. They can do as many more. All of them show in their transcripts. So these are the 3 curricular components of Launch. Those 3 curricular components have a very intentional focus on the development of transferable skills, because we know that those really matter to recruiters and to performance, and also interaction with mentors, because we know the value of that through data and through practice. And then we also engage students to have access to resources and opportunities and networks through career communities and identity communities. If you notice, if you scroll up, you'll see that there's a tab with communities, and you see all the career communities that are available to students. You also see all the identity affinity communities, so that we tap into the career interests and the identity interests of our students. And then we do 3 things in each of them. We, of course, facilitate programming and events like this ones. We have a panel for this community, for the K-12 community. We also provide students with opportunities to develop and to connect with networks. And then also we have a curated space for each community. So in this particular case, you can see that we have a K-12 education community that feeds data from multiple systems. And then you have customized or community-specific opportunities, right, for experiences or internships or jobs. You have mentors who are ready to engage with students in K-12, blogs, events, success stories from alums and students, leadership, we have done right there. Internships and jobs, resources that can be filtered, new courses, especially electives, right? And we're constantly feeding content here to help students think bigger, right? A student might come here thinking of an internship, and they find mentors, and then they think of a mentor, and then they find an event in which they want to participate, etc. Now, part of the launch effort is also putting together programming. So we have Expo going on right now, the 2020 Launch Expo, which has 3 programs. One is the panel series. We have 18 of them, 1 per community. Another one is an event that has been recorded, so you can see it here if you wanted to, which was a presentation of posters of students' experiences of different types. It was a fantastic event. It was really powerful presentations. It was a very well put together event that helps other students who are considering immersive experiences to know what students are doing and how to engage in those experiences. And on October 23rd, we have a Launch Communities Fair that will have a space per community, right, where student leaders and faculty and staff and alums and employers will be there talking about experiences related to the community, opportunities that are available for students to explore. All first-year students are expected to participate through the DSEM experience. And the panel series, as you can see, it has a similar distribution, 1 panel per community. And of course, we have the K-12 panel here. And you see that we have our illustrious panel highlighted here. And so for participants, don't only think of the virtual experience we're having as an exhausting one, which I know it is because we're in Zoom most of the day, but also think of it as an augmented reality opportunity, right? Throughout the panel, you can browse through the experiences of our panelists because they have been interviewed and the stories are right here. You can also browse through the page of the community, right? And get acquainted with the resources. Dawn, in a couple of minutes, will post the program of today that lists the questions and kind of gives you a walkthrough of tonight, what we're doing tonight. And then you can kind of get and perhaps think of connecting, following up with one of our panelists after the program. So That's it for lunch. Let me stop there and pass the torch to Don, with whom I have the privilege to work every day. Don, if you would like to introduce yourself and then get us started with the panel.
Thank you, Daniel. Panelists, welcome. My name is Dawn Lamaro. I am the operations manager for launch and the executive assistant to Daniel. And thank you, panelists, for being here. I'm very excited for tonight. I think it's going to be great. And I'm excited to see a lot of you. Some of you haven't seen it in a while. So what I'm going to introduce you, if you can please introduce yourselves by sharing your minors, majors, any degrees you have received, your current position that you hold, and highlights of your career path that led you to where you are today. For the first question, for introducing, I will ask you one by one. After this, I'll have questions to you, and if I'd prefer if you just start jumping right in. For introductions, I would like to start with Dylan, if that's okay with you, because, wait, I have a shout out. Happy birthday, Dylan.
Thank you all very much. So yes, my name is Dylan Jones. I graduated Drew in 2015, and I majored in political science and economics. And a last minute game change in my senior year, actually through a fellow friend and alum, Andrew Bishop, convinced me to apply to Teach for America. And I applied to Teach for America, and I got accepted, and I moved to the Mississippi Delta, where I still am. I am now starting year 6 in the Mississippi Delta, and I taught middle school math for 2 years. So typical, or the Teach for America commitment is a 2-year teaching commitment. At the end of my 2-year commitment, I had signed on for a 3rd year, and we had a leadership transition, and the incoming superintendent met with me and felt that I was best served in the curriculum department for the district. And since 2017, I've been serving as the district data specialist, and I've actually just been recently promoted to the director of instructional technology and assessments for the Sunflower County Consolidated School District. So, John, do you mind? Can you repeat the other questions? I tried to go through them in my head, but that was a lot.
I'm on mute. I'm sorry. I do that all the time. If you could just give us a couple of highlights on your career path of what led you to where you are now.
Sure. So my passion for education was always there. It was just mismanaged, as I like to say. In college, I was like on a track to become a lawyer because that's what I thought I wanted to be from the time I was in middle school. And I got to Drew and I met some really awesome professors, and they just convinced me that my passion for education was much greater than what I was saying, and that I should really take some education classes with Dr. McGuinn in the political science department. And I think it's like global studies as well now, so I apologize. But Dr. McGuinn, I took some education classes, and that really reignited, it focused my passion for education. And then applying for Teach for America and gaining acceptance into Teach for America and then teaching was honestly one of the most humbling experiences that I think I will ever experience in my entire life. And even continuing my work as an administrator in the Mississippi Delta, you know, each day is just like an honor and a privilege to work along such awesome colleagues and just working with brilliant students. And that's why I'm still here, and I actually don't imagine myself being anywhere else right now. So I have no plans of leaving this location, my career path, or even my job right now. So that's where I'm at.
Great, thank you, Dylan. That's wonderful. And I was talking to Daniel before, I love to hear the different avenues that education can take you outside of the classroom. So that's wonderful, thank you. Lauren.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I graduated in 2018 with my Spanish major and psych minor, and then I stayed till 2019 for my master's in teaching. I'm currently a first grade teacher in Hanover Township, so not too far from Drew, and I started there last year, so this is my second year. So I haven't had a full year of normal classroom teaching yet, besides my student teaching. So it's been pretty interesting these past 2 years. I am in person teaching right now, so in a hybrid model. I've pretty much always wanted to be a teacher. I've coached softball since I was young, worked with children always. And then in high school, we had a program that you could start like semi-student teaching. So I started there. And then coming into Drew, we had a separate program at the time. I knew I wanted to be in that program. And then we had the opportunity for the MAT to open up. So I rolled into that program and I stayed through that. I think I answered those questions. My direction was pretty straight from the beginning.
Lauren, you were a BA MAT, correct?
Yes, BA MAT.
Right, so she was one of ours that, for those who aren't familiar with it, we have undergraduate BA MAT concentration, where you can start the concentration as a junior and take up to 1 to 4 educational graduate courses to go towards your master's degree, starting as your junior year. And I believe, Lauren, you were part of that, so congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Kashawn.
Good evening, everyone. Kashawn Lopes. I graduated in 2013 with my Bachelor of Art in English and a double minor in creative writing and Pan-African Studies. I also completed the MAT program, I was in the 1-year track. And from there, I completed my Master of Art in Teaching, started student teaching. I worked in the South Orange Maplewood School District for a few years before becoming a literacy coach. And I eventually went back to school for my education specialist at Seton Hall University. And currently I'm a vice principal in the Newark Public School District. And in terms of what led me to my career path, I too applied for TFA. I decided to participate in the Master of Art in Teaching program instead. Dr. McGowan encouraged me that, there are students all over, but especially within New Jersey, that need individuals that care about them and that want to see them be successful. So I decided to do the MAT program as well as a substitute teach at the time in my hometown of Irvington, New Jersey. And from there, I moved to South Orange Maplewood, where I secured my first job and stayed for many years before leaving.
Excellent, thank you, Kashawn. And I have to say, Kashawn, my heart was so happy when I saw you were a vice principal of your school. I was so proud. That's great, congratulations. And Nancy.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Nancy Vitalone-Recaro, and I'm currently faculty in the teacher education program here at Drew. And I work with our BA MAT candidates as well as our MAT candidates. So I want to give a shout out to all of you that were and are currently part of the program. I'm super excited to see lots of names that I recognize on here. So yay, and welcome back, everybody. It's exciting. Career path starting in. I feel like my story is similar to a lot to yours, Lauren, when you're talking about that desire to teaching. I always feel like that was kind of in my blood. It's something that I was just always doing from a young age, volunteering to work with younger children, doing the camp counselor thing, and then coming into wanting to, actually being certified as a teacher. So my initial teaching certification, I think this is going to be interesting to people that think they know me, is that my initial teaching certification, I have a BS and a teaching certification in health and physical education, which was my first certification. And I actually did teach health and physical education in high school for half a year. And then I decided to go back, and for my master's degree, I pursued adapted physical education. So I was kind of honing in on my areas of interest in working with diverse students, taught an adapted physical education for a couple of years. And it was really interesting is that just naturally part of my teaching, it was a lot of active learning, which is so interesting now when we're talking about what we see in classrooms in terms of brain breaks and active learning, and the plethora of research that is linking active learning to improved cognition and improved academic achievement. And it's something that I was doing kind of from the very beginning, way back when. And looking at early concept development and language development and promoting that through movement. So that really interested me. Went back to school for my Teacher of Students with Disabilities endorsement, which is really how that was my transition into special education. And then from there, I taught for a couple of years, and then again decided that, I think maybe I want to keep going with this, and pursued my doctorate at Temple University in Philadelphia. And I chose to go into the area of special education rather than motor development. I felt that that is where I could make a bigger impact in terms of kind of the research that interested me and the skill set that I had. One of the things that kind of, you talk about timing and how things get put in front of you for opportunities. And while I was at Temple, I had a teaching assistantship because, like many of you, putting yourself through graduate school, I know what that is like. And so having a teaching assistantship there, one of my responsibilities was actually supervising undergraduate candidates while they were doing their student teaching. And I loved being in the community, developing community partnerships while mentoring future teachers. And I think that's really where I began to develop my love for that aspect of my career. So from there, I actually did not go straight into academia. I have a wide interest in working with families that have children with disabilities and working with community partnerships. And I did research at the University of Connecticut Child Study Center, and then I worked at New York Medical College and partnership with community programs there for inclusion, worked with the Child Care Council and Head Start Council, doing a lot of grant work in terms of program development for including young children with disabilities into community programs, such as the child care, early preschool programs, as well as Head Start. And moving on from there, due to family changes, moving back to New Jersey, and that's where I started. I thought that I wanted to be on an academic track in terms of really working in a formal basis in teacher education. So a couple of other institutions in New Jersey, and I ended up at Drew. Long story, so cut it there. Those of you that had me in class know that I can talk a lot. Anyway, one of the things that really excited me about Drew, I think I'm a non kind of traditional academic, is I love research. I'm very practically oriented in making sure that the research that I'm doing has practical applications for teachers as well as families and students with disabilities. And one of the things that really attracted me to Drew was the fact that small program in terms of the liberal arts piece of that, and being able to have the flexibility to really, I call, indulge my interest and my love of teaching, my interest and love of working in the community as well. And coming here to Drew, that was just such a perfect match. Those of you that have been here know in terms of kind of the orientation and the philosophy of Drew itself, and also with our teacher ed program. So I think that's enough right now.
Thank you,
We can talk
Nancy.
later about questions.
Thank you,
It's
Nancy.
really a diverse path. So I feel like those of you that are here, and I think, you know, I heard Daniel was talking about the fact, I wrote it down here, 11.9 transitions, and that kind of seems scary. Yep. But when you have ideas of where you want to go, and we don't always know how to get there, but I'm feeling like the skill set that you come out with from Drew, regardless of what your background is, it's a great set of skills, knowledge, dispositions that you will possess. And when opportunities present themselves, you'll be able to take advantage of those. So I said I came into academia in a non-traditional way. I had multiple transitions, right? And you will as well. And I think one of the things that Drew will be able to offer is your ability to navigate that in a way that you can, as our other candidates have said, is really designing what works for them and indulge their passions and their interests as a professional.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you. And Nancy and I, just a background, Nancy and I worked together side by side for many, many years when I was back in the teacher ed program here at Drew. So it's great to see you again, Nancy. Thank you. So our next question, which kind of feeds off of the first question, is, if any, what opportunities or challenges may have led you to your current job? Examples, internships, networking, mentors, and just jump right in.
Okay, so I'll start off. Definitely the student teaching and practicum hours led me to where I am today. A former professor in the program, actually from South Orange Maplewood, introduced me to someone, so that helped me with securing a job. So before graduation, I actually had secured a job in the South Orange Maplewood School District, teaching 7th grade English. So practicum hours and the hands-on experience, being in the classroom, nothing can replace student teaching, and being in front of students, testing it out, having faculty and staff as well as your peers give you that on-the-spot feedback, and coming to job interviews with your teacher work sample prepared, me for securing a job immediately. So that was one of the things that I found very helpful, and I felt very confident as a young educator walk into the field of education.
I'll piggyback right off of that. And I guess one of the things, because I was just thinking about what we were talking about, just being constantly pushed it, Drew, like allowing you to be like pushed to the level of being uncomfortable. Because I think anyone that has taught can relate to the fact that when I graduated Drew and Teach for America, I had 5 weeks of training. I'm an alternate or, a non-traditional teacher, so I didn't have practicum hours. I didn't go to school for it. And like when I walked into that classroom, like the children are on, and they're always on. They're never like, they want you at 100% all the time. And I think back to my first year, and I think like the skills that like allowed me to survive and make it through and really develop a passion for teaching was being just constantly pushed and having all the different experiences like Wall Street and UN semesters, which I think are now called New York City treks, and just being surrounded by people that don't let you just settle down or fall into the status quo, like finding the professors working with you to find who you are and then really honing in on that allowed for me to kind of just constantly be resilient in times where I was like, I just don't understand how teachers teach, and shout out to all of my teachers that put up with me while I was a student. And I think that is like one of the things that sets Drew apart is the small class sizes and those relationships you can build with people across outside of faculty. Like some of my closest mentors are, Stacy, who's on the call, as well as other, non-faculty members in administration that I still talk to this day, that I think, is a really awesome part of the Drew experience.
Yeah, I mean, both of them have said it, the small class sizes and the relationships with your professors and getting the education at Drew really sets you apart, and the experiences at Drew. I was in the civic program as an undergrad, so having that experience, working with the community in my passion, I focused on the education within the community in a nonprofit sector. So having those opportunities at Drew to work in education in different ways and work with children in different ways really set apart from other candidates for the job who might not have such diverse experiences as we are offered at Drew.
So feeling my background is a little bit different since I'm the only non-Drew grad on the panel here. So in thinking, I guess, in terms of what, this is now my 4th year here at Drew, and seeing our teacher candidates in both the BA MAT concentration and our MAT program, I kind of want to echo the things that Lauren is talking about, is that not being afraid, and also Dylan too, is like not being afraid to push yourself. So when people set that bar high, knowing that it's not intended to be like, and I got you or any of that nature. I mean, setting the bar high is intentional. But I think one of the things that we really try to do in our teacher ed program is to make sure that the supports are in place. You know, we do set that bar high, but having the supports in place so that if you're less successful, or if you feel that you're not doing as well as you could, is having that backup from faculty and also from the cohort and the student community. So I appreciate kind of that feedback, both from, you know, from the other panelists from that Drew perspective.
So with that being said, you're going to love the next question. How did your experience at Drew support your development and journey to where you are today? I know that'd be a little tough for you, Nets, but as an employee.
Okay, since you bounced it back to me. Oh, sorry, Dylan. Since you bounced it back, I will start there. And I think I've seen a couple of common threads in the comments from the panelists in terms of opportunity, support, and really kind of the culture and the mindset that exists at Drew. And I see that in our teacher candidates and with other faculty with whom I've worked, and that opportunity to really develop even further as a professional. And you know, looking at me, kind of, you know, not the youngest, you know, faculty member that's out there, and I've been in got a wide, you know, range of institutions of higher education where I've worked. But really finding Drew as an academic home because of you know, what it stands for in terms of the issues of social justice, and in terms of the links that Drew makes across, and in particular, you know, through the launch program with your treks and so on, in terms of the those opportunities that really prepare folks to have an impact in the community. So that really resonated with me about the launch program. But that's really one of the reasons why I came to Drew, is I felt that I had so much to offer, not only in terms of our Drew community and teacher education, but also into the wider community in terms of what our partnerships are. So that is something that is really, when you spend time at Drew, is pervasive and it's really strong. And for me, seeing that, I guess, from the other side as a professional, is having that in being able to indulge my interests from, you know, teaching, partnerships, research, and so on, and saying like, yeah, that's really good, you can do that, and never being say like, yeah, I don't think that that's something that we can do right now. And I feel that that has allowed me to even grow and develop as a professional, and that's what I see in our students as well.
Yeah, I can jump in. Again, like, you know, entering education is not, you know, my intended path, but an awesome path. You know, I was a finance intern for the chief financial officer at the time when I was at Drew, and I served on a few committees while I was there with like cabinet level officials dealing with just kind of some of the program offerings at Drew that I believe some of the work actually led to the new things that exist today. And I guess, you know, thinking about how I went from teaching and now to an administrator, you know, having the non-traditional experience set me apart because I had skills that I brought to the classroom that a lot of teaching programs don't have. Like, for instance, you know, I learned a few coding languages while at Drew working as a finance intern. And that turned into me building out some really awesome data analytics for our district, which kind of ended me as the district data specialist, someone that could provide the modeling needed for our state accountability system, because I'm sure as it is like in New Jersey, we all get graded A through F, and I was able to, you know, write a program that could determine what that is. So I guess just like bringing all of those skills and all of those experiences that Drew provides all of their students, you know, makes you, I don't know if you can hear, but my dog is like absolutely losing its mind in the back, and I apologize. And you can just bring out all of those experiences that Drew is giving everyone. And it's just an awesome, you know, you just kind of see your Drew experience live out to fruition as you're in your, you know, temporary career path or just a job or wherever you are. You can always call upon like a specific moment of your Drew experience to, you know, that led you to that point.
I agree with Dylan. The learning experiences that Drew offered both inside and outside of the classroom, formerly Drew International Seminars, now Trek, being able to study abroad and travel and, you know, apply what you've learned in your coursework to real world job experiences or different places around the world really prepares you to network and to build different opportunities. The coursework alone, I took a statistics class, and I find that it helps me every day with analyzing data, you know, art history. It's you're just so well-rounded that you can really walk into any profession and make different connections. And that liberal arts education, you know, being very analytical, critical writers, and being able to communicate clearly are all skills that will help you in any profession. So that's one of the things that I really do appreciate about Drew and the networking opportunities.
Thank you, guys. So next question is, what preparation advice would you give to students or alums who are interested in a career in education?
I would definitely say start getting experience with kids if you haven't already, if you're not sure. You know, I came in knowing that's what I wanted to do, but I had some friends being like, oh, I don't know, like even from high school, who started in high school in our program that we had with children. They're like, I absolutely don't like this. And they chose something else, which is great that they had that experience early on. And like we were just talking about, Drew offers so many opportunities for different things. So take advantage of trying everything you can. If you're not sure about a class, take it. Maybe that will open the next door for you. So just taking every opportunity you can to try out the different avenues if you're just not sure, or if you just want to try something else.
I agree. I'd say just follow your passion and your interests, and that will lead you to various places. And if you want to move into education, I would say always put children first. Let children be your guide, and you will achieve wonderful things. So that has helped me, and I'm sure it will help you as well.
And I guess, you know, just being totally transparent, you know, education isn't something that is like what people think about, you know, as like a top regarded profession. And, you know, honestly, a lot of my struggle at Drew was kind of setting aside my finance or law aspirations and tapping into my like education aspirations. And honestly, you know, you just have to have that moment, and you really have to like reflect and think inward about what you want to do. And when you do that, you know, Drew will you will be surrounded by people in Drew to make that happen and to let that happen. And when that does, just harness that, you know, and because if you're passionate about it and you put children first, you know, like you know, you'll enjoy every day of work, you know, and that isn't something that everyone gets to say. And education is one of the most instantly rewarding professions, I think, out there. And from my experience, you know, every day I'm just absolutely rewarded with working virtually with teachers and students and some of our students in person. And it's just like not a day goes by that it isn't just absolutely rewarding to be an educator in Mississippi.
One of the things that I keep thinking about is I definitely want to concur with the rest of the panel in terms of in terms of a career path is really one of the best things that you can do is, and I agree with Dylan, is there's no other feeling like that, is to be able to have, you know, when you do put you know, your students first, and there's no feeling like being the one that opens the doors, and the one that provides opportunities, the one that supports, the one that provides that safe haven for students that need it. And that's a lot of power. And it's interesting, I can't remember, one of the other panelists were saying is that, you know, may not be one of the most highly regarded professions that's out there in the world, but when you look at the significant impact and those with whom teachers work, I mean, that is the future of our country. And I firmly believe anybody that's interested in coming on into education, I'm like, come on in. The timing is absolutely perfect. When we're considering kind of the swirls of what's happening, you know, at society writ large, and people feeling, well, what am I going to do about this? There's anger, there's frustration, and there's so many emotions that are swirling. And when we're really thinking about those that can have a significant positive impact on the future, right? I mean, you talk about this, Daniel talked about having an impact on the community and an impact globally. Teachers have that ability, and they do have that power. And I've chosen that word specifically. When we start looking at, and I won't go too long, when we start thinking about, you know, how do we do that, and what is culturally relevant pedagogy? You know, the Launch program is helping Drew students to you know, to embrace their identity and look at where their identities intersect, and in which communities they're comfortable, and how to celebrate that. You learn how to do that as an individual while you're at Drew. And one of the things that we do in our teacher education program is, how do we build on that? How do we build on that strength and that what you've built through your own Launch program? And how do we turnkey that and bring it out into, you know, into the larger society? And begin to think about, we can impact that through our culturally relevant pedagogy, and teachers impacting children, the next generation of the ones that will be the change makers. So if anybody's thinking about it and you're like, and how can I make that change? You're the conduit, and that you're creating the change makers and our leaders of the next generation. And we need that, and that can happen here at Drew.
Well said. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. So I have one last question coming from me, and then I will open it up to our attendees to ask questions. You can verbally ask questions if you desire. If you want to put it in chat, I will read the questions coming from chat. So my last one, and it's a little heavy. I'm sorry, something just happened on my computer. How has the industry of education been impacted by the current societal and global changes we are facing? And how do you see your field impacting our communities or the planet? I know, it's a tough one.
I can jump in because I think Stacy's question kind of is the good jump off from that point. Because, for instance, the timeline in Mississippi, you know, we start school August to May, so we're like a month ahead than if you're in the Northeast. And so we left for spring break, and I was working with the superintendent over spring break, and, you know, I had said something to the effect of, you know, we should probably be prepared or start thinking about what it might look like if this really starts to take off like they're saying. And like, that was literally like March 12th. And we had a meeting for 9 a.m. the next day. And at 10:30, like, our governor issued a memo to all of the state superintendent of education and the public school to shut down for at least a week. So then we were like, okay, well, we'll take a week off, you know, it will be okay, and we can, you know, move from there. And then, you know, in the middle of that week, it was another month. And then the week after that, it was May. And then the week after that, it was, you're not coming back, and you can't even have summer school in person. So, and I don't know what it looks like elsewhere, but our students are still not, I'm like, our staff and faculty are coming to work and we're doing it virtually, but our students are still home. So our students haven't been back to school since March. And I think, if people don't talk about the impact that that's going to have, because you can blame COVID, like no one is making, you can use COVID as the excuse, but the fact of the matter is, my district serves about 4,500 students, and, about 1,300 of those are kindergarten through third grade. So they're currently learning the most foundational reading skills through Zoom. And anyone that is familiar with phonics and phonological awareness, that is a very difficult task to teach in the middle of a pandemic when people might have masks on and you have to socially distance. So, it kind of just lends itself to that we are at like such a nexus point for education. And I think Stacy said, we're basically one giant case study because no one's ever done this. Well, no one's done this before in this type of environment. And, I think that one of the best things that has come from the pandemic, not to make light of a very serious situation, is that school districts like mine in the Mississippi Delta, where the average median income for my county is like $25,000 for a family of four, is that we have been provided such substantial funding to just jumpstart all of the awesome programs that other districts have had access to. And it's leveled the playing field because this money was based on need and not just on enrollment or not just on attendance, which can be, very not good metrics of funding formulas. And we've just been able to we've been able to go one-to-one, and we've been able to renovate policies, and we've been able to consolidate things that probably would have taken 10 years in a normal environment, and just using the pandemic as a way to just change what education looks like for the future, so that we can not only catch up from where we were, but also start getting ahead from where we could be. And I think that is probably just one of the most powerful things from this entire situation.
I agree, Dylan. The pandemic has highlighted, different disparities in education that have long existed. You really see the opportunity gap with students who have access to devices, as well as those who have access to internet. And it really has pushed us along and forced us to, for some schools become one-to-one. We have several districts where it was an easy transition for them to switch to remote learning. And then we have some students or families that need access to Wi-Fi or hotspots. They have multiple children in the home. There's no one at home to take care of them while the parents are working. So it really highlights several issues and socioeconomic issues as well. And for my own building, we have roughly about 800 students. It's pre-K to 8th grade. It has reformed all of our practices. We're constantly looking at CDC guidelines and rechanging our possible reopening plan. We have to be mindful of how students enter the building, how many students can enter the building, down to the fact that no one can share tools or resources. We have to have hand sanitizing stations. So every single practice or aspect of schooling has changed and will continue to change based on further guidelines and what happens. But it's a blessing in disguise in some ways, because it has pushed us along further and provided a much needed conversation to take place with education with regard to those who have and those who do not.
And just to jump in with one last thing, because you brought it out, I can't believe I didn't mention access. 33% of our constituents in our county didn't even have broadband. Like, it wasn't the fact that internet, they couldn't get internet, they couldn't afford internet, we would provide it to them. It was the fact that they just simply didn't have the broadband access to even have a wireless access point at their house. And within a matter of months, something that was never discussed because no one ever wanted to deal with it was at the forefront of every state legislator's mind. And at this point, by the new year, that gap is going to be reduced to only 5 or 6%. And it's just absolutely astounding, the inequities that were brought about and just immediately championed by both, sides of the aisle, in the name of education, because they just saw how much it was needed and how, virtual learning and technology and learning are not going away anytime soon.
I think Kashan and Dylan did a great job with that. I can't add to that. Nicely done.
As Stacy asked or said, this is like a big social experiment. So, and Dylan brought it up too, the younger kids, it's going to be so interesting to see. I teach first grade. I'm now teaching half of kindergarten and trying to get them to first grade, all in the same, breath. So, and we are in person. We're lucky enough to have a small enough district to be in person if the children choose to. So I couldn't imagine, like you guys were saying, if you didn't have access or, so it's good that those conversations are coming up. And the other side of that is the social emotional piece. That has been a big piece, more recently. So the changes, it would be interesting to see the mental health changes as well as the academic changes that are happening to children at this time. And maybe following the kindergartners who haven't experienced schooling until now, and this is the first time they're experiencing school, and they're experiencing it like, years past, teachers in the front of the room teaching, like no sharing, it's you and the teacher, really mostly teacher led.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to open it up to questions for anyone who may have questions for our panelists. Or Daniel, if you have any questions, feel free to just jump in and ask or throw it into the chat and I'll read it out.
I have one, but I'll wait to see if there's a participant who has another question.
Okay, I'll break the ice. Well, I was waiting to see if Stacy had a question because I saw that she was active in the chat. So this is Gabrielle. I'm a Drew graduate from 1982, a long time ago. Very nice to see these changes with Drew Connect and etc. So my question is, and I'm asking this with the best intentions, we chose private school for our daughter because when we were looking at public schools, and I live in Maryland, Montgomery County is one of the, we are told, one of the best school districts, among the best school districts in the United States. When we were looking at public schools, and our daughter actually visited the one that's assigned to our area, and she visited for a day to see if she wanted to go there. And when we met with the, I guess it was a vice principal for the 9th grade, the freshman year. The question we posed was, how does the teacher and how does the school, how are you able to set and enforce or monitor standards of behavior in the school, right? Where the teachers and the administration are able to really set the standards for how are we going to be as a community, how are we going to be as a student community, and how are we going to create this positive climate of exchange and learning, and how are you as a school able to kind of enforce that in spite of parents that might be intervening with your judgment. So I guess it's a long-winded question.
I don't have the answer, but I will definitely start by saying that I think it is paramount that administrators and teachers center that entire conversation at your school around relationships and building very strong relationships, not only amongst yourselves, principal to teachers, and then teachers between teachers, and then teachers to students and students to administrators and students to teachers. Because I think if you start having a conversation around expectations and setting expectations, you can find yourself going down a very long road if you do that absent of relationships. And that's really good advice generally for any profession you go into, or any kind of team that you're trying to lead or build, or any type of coalition activity, is just the relationship piece is so critical. And, it's emphasized in teacher education programs across the country that, like I'll use my dad as an example, didn't have, when he went to school, relationships with students was deemed inappropriate, and it wasn't anything that was existed. And now you can't get the scores or results you want without building those meaningful relationships, because the students that you're teaching, the ones that are, you are responsible for day in and day out, have to know that you care and love for them. And then once that exists is when you can start building the culture, expectation, and rules as a unit, as a team together to meet those expectations. But I will take, that's all I have for that.
Honestly, that's what I was going to say too, Dylan. It starts from the top down. Just like you mentioned, you all have to be working together. But if you have an administration that everybody's not gelling with, then the community is going to feel that all the way around. I have to say I'm very fortunate to be in a district that has that relationship with the community, with each other, teachers to students, teachers to teachers, all the way around. I know within my classroom, I don't really touch curriculum for the first 2 weeks of school. We are there for learning who each student is, what they need from you, and really being there as a figure to them before even being the teacher. And so, like Dylan said, relationships are just a huge part of being that role model. I mean, you can think about it, you're not going to want to do something or be part of an expectation if you're not gelling with somebody, or you don't think they're there for you, or you don't think they care. So just getting that relationship piece is huge in order to have the mutual respect and expectations come along with it.
I think, oh, go ahead, Kishan.
Go ahead, Lauren. Nancy, sorry. Nancy, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I think one of the other things Gabrielle was talking about, I guess in the context of a high school, it sounded like, and I think one of the things also is that I definitely concur with my fellow panelists with regards to kind of relationship building, and from a larger scale, administrative top down, that includes the teachers, administration, other staff members, as well as the students. Essential. But there's another piece of that. So what happens when there are missteps? What happens when we have students that are not stepping up to, as Gabrielle put it, those standards of behavior? Happens in every school district. And so one of the things now that there's some really positive research around issues related to restorative justice. Is a practice that had been used in our legal justice system that got very positive results, and kind of turnkeyed that, and really using some of those strategies actually in schools where there are extreme behaviors, so that we're moving away from this kind of that pipeline, as they call it, to prison, from students that aren't adhering to the standards of behaviors or expectations in the school. How do we do that, and how do we navigate that? And I think that is super interesting, is because a lot of positive results, and Kishan, maybe you'll talk a little bit about that because I saw you're nodding your head, but there's a lot of positive results from that in schools. And I think, earlier on I talked about, so what is our impact on the community, and then globally. And I think that issue of restorative justice, applying that in an individual classroom, applying that school-wide and then district-wide. So that's kind of an adopted approach to managing what we would consider challenging behaviors. And I often wonder why that's not done now. We're not going to go politics, but we're thinking about those same things can happen when we have two entities, that are not agreeing, and that are supposedly against each other. So I'm feeling that experiencing that restorative justice and the positive outcomes across the board is something that that students then bring with them, and then can see that out into the larger community. And that goes back to having that, as a teacher, having that impact on your students to create change makers in society.
Yeah, I agree, Nancy. I think it's all about having a shared set of values, a shared mission, and a shared vision, because as a school leader, I'm entering into a community. So I can't automatically, bring my own perspective. I have to really think about where I'm working and what are the challenges. At the end of the day, parents and teachers, as well as school leaders, we want children to be successful. We also are there to support families, and they need to trust us. So we need to build those relationships and bonds, as mentioned before. And some of my colleagues that I have on here, Dr. Jacinta Calzada and Mr. Guerra, can echo this. It's about working together, servant leadership. We're here to serve. We're here to serve students. We're here to serve families, and really accepting that growth mindset and mindset where, as school leaders, we model what we expect. So if it's a piece of paper that's on the floor, we're picking it up, so that we are also teaching our students to have those same values that, hey, school, this is our home. We're a family. We take care of each other, and letting our parents and our other stakeholders, drawing them into school, opening up our doors, having different events and activities, partnering with different organizations where we're feeding the needy and we're providing our students with access. We have to bridge that gap. It's not parents. I always like to say that it's our children, because when they walk into their doors, they spend most of the time with us. They're away from their families. So they want to know that their children are safe, that they're going to get the education needed. So it's just being transparent and building that familial bond with the community.
Terrific. Thank you, guys. Sammy has a question. Sammy, nice to see you again. What advice do you have for an MAT student interested in pursuing administration? Was there any PDs or opportunities you had that led you to administration? Nice question, Sammy. Thank you.
I'll jump in first. So you're already an MAT student, so that's the first start. And then if you're teaching right now, honestly, as someone that served at a school level leadership and district level leadership now, asking your principal, assistant principal, instructional coach, wherever, what I can do to help you is probably the most practical experience you'll receive for that role, or even just learning what it is like to be a school leader. Because the getting a master's is great, all of that studying is awesome, but absent of practical experience, like I believe Nancy was talking about, won't take you very far. And when you learn the systems from the school that you're at, and you can self-identify how to do it, or then you start, suggesting to your school leadership, or if you have a school leadership team, ideas or ways of doing it, or just taking things off their plate. One, I would highly doubt that there is a school leader out there that isn't overwhelmed and wouldn't love to give some tasks away to some teacher leaders. And then two, you just get that firsthand experience. And it's a good relationship building metric. So when you are looking for that administrative role, your principal or your assistant principal, whoever you helped out in those moments or during that experience, will remember that, and that will come out in a letter of recommendation, or, just a casual conversation to whoever is hiring on that team. Those are the ways to kind of set yourself apart and those opportunities. And then I'm not sure where you are, but in Mississippi, we have a whole administrator PD website on our State Department of Education, and doing those and getting networked into that is really good, because then you build relationships with administrators throughout wherever you are in different districts, and you can learn from similar experiences, and then gain from other experiences. And it just is a really powerful network of people to kind of start your working yourself way into administration.
I agree. I'd say that the first step is just being a great teacher. Even as a school administrator, I'm still a teacher. I'm a teacher of teachers. So just having that mindset and that practice of being a lifelong learner, and as Dylan mentioned, assisting your school administrator with different tasks, letting them notice, hey, when I walk into this classroom, I know this teacher's great at engagement. So then you now become a teacher leader, because they can call on you to model that for other teachers as well. And you start to build your experience and your background with modeling for other educators. And on a grander scale, you may present a different tool for the district or a resource that you've used, or you're tracking data. So it always goes back to teaching. As an administrator, you never stop teaching. You're just a teacher of teachers, and accepting that mindset. I have some students that I work with, if they're struggling, I'll go into a classroom and I'll pull a small group just to model that for the teachers as well. And then seeking an advanced degree in administration, but never stop learning.
Love that. Love that. Thank you. I have one quick question if nobody does. Since my time here with Launch Center, I've learned so much more than I ever did about transferable skills. So I'd like to hear from everyone throughout college classes, internships, student teaching. Can you tell me what transferable skills were the most useful for you in your career at this point?
I can start with flexibility. We all know that being a teacher, you need to be flexible. Day to day, minute to minute is going to be different. You can write the best lesson plans, you can have A, B, C, D options, and still Z is not enough. So flexibility is huge. So when I was first hired last year, I was hired as a 5th grade teacher. And I was supposed to start in November. A week before school started, I was asked to move to 1st grade. So I took the 1st grade job starting in September. And, then the pandemic hit and you're asked to now teach online. So you have to be flexible in that. So flexibility is one of the biggest pieces, and communication skills with your co-teachers, your team. The other 1st grade teachers I have are amazing, and being open to what they have to say. They've been 4 years and 16 years in. And even though this year is new to all of us, I've learned so much from them in the last year and a half than by talking to them and asking them, hey, how's this work? My administration was great enough to let the other 1st grade teacher come into my room while I was teaching, kind of like a mentor, to see how I was doing, and having that open communication really helped. So I think flexibility and communication, great transferable skills to have.
I'd say definitely with flexibility comes being a problem solver. So on a daily basis, you will have to troubleshoot. It's part of being a great teacher. You have to anticipate what are some of the struggles that my students are going to encounter, and how can I have a backup plan. I know if my student's struggling with writing a conclusion, I automatically have to prepare something for them. I have to model it. I have to pull a small group. If they're still struggling with sentence structure, what am I going to do next? How am I going to support them? So it's constantly thinking in advance and planning for those problems, and being flexible and creative. Building those relationships will definitely help.
And then remembering the times that teachers and professors had empathy with you, and extending that same empathy and grace to your students. Sometimes teachers can get caught up in the power dynamics between teacher versus student. And we just have to remember, at the end of the day, we were all there. We're all human, and we all deserve a lot of grace and empathy, especially now, but always. And just to reflect on those times that you remember, and we'll use college as an experience, you just needed that extension, or you needed just a few extra days, or whatever the scenario was, and your professor, allowed it without a moment of hesitation. Just remember that empathy and store those up, and then, kind of sprinkle those out while you're in education and you're teaching, because it goes a long way. And kids and teachers remember that, and adds to the relationship building aspect that is so critical in education today.
I also want to add on, because Sean talked about being a problem solver. And I think that kind of is in line with being a critical thinker as well. is being able to appraise a situation and think through all aspects of that critically. Another component of that, I think, in terms of a transferable skill, is being open-minded. You are an expert in your field, right? You come out of the MAT program because you have an advanced degree, and the nature of the experiences that you've compiled through your years at Drew, you naturally step out as somewhat of a school leader. But I think being open-minded and being able to acknowledge that there are other ways of doing things. Not saying that you always have to accept those, but I think, and this also goes to, I think Dylan was talking about the humility piece in there. Did you say that? You said empathy, but okay, I'll add the humility in there, is saying that the acknowledgement that there may be another way to do this, and then thinking through it, and then being willing to kind of make those adjustments. I think maybe that might be a little fine tuning that goes into what Lauren was talking about in terms of those dispositions that make you an effective collaborator. I mean, I'm seeing that as like the big picture, and you've given some great examples of that, and just kind of adding to that a little bit in terms of how we might deconstruct that a little bit more and develop a larger set of those transferable skills that really fit, you know, to being just a good person and a successful individual, even outside of your professional identity.
Wonderful. Daniel, do you have anything?
If it's okay, I have a couple of questions that I've been thinking of
Absolutely.
seeing if you have some feedback, some thoughts. The first one is I have always been mesmerized at human nature when we're young to perceive learning as one of the greatest joys of life. Right? I've had the blessing of having I adopted a little one 5 years ago, and I just cannot have enough, right? And I have, I've studied education for a long time, right? And I have read, and I have experienced, and I have noticed firsthand how powerful it is. I mean, the most fascinating moment of the day of my little one is when she can read something, she can say something, she can draw something, she can understand something, and it's so intrinsic, right? And so powerful. And unfortunately, I think this is the challenging side of the scenario, is that for many years, we have had a traditional educational system that in many ways quenches that, right? Just because of the standardization, both of instruction and assessment and curriculum, you know, in many ways assuming that we all learn at the same time, the same content in the same way. And, you know, I grew up with dyslexia. I know that I don't learn like other people, right? It's like, it's so obvious that we all are different. So one question that I have for you is, I would imagine that you all have experienced this and know this very well, but how have you managed to try to either keep or return that passion for learning in your students, and allowing that to be the motivator and the energy, right, that powers their education and their learning experience, their growth?
All right. Oh, jumping in here. I think, well, first of all, I don't think there's any easy answer to this, and I just really enjoyed your description of your little one, and your description of early learning in terms of it, you know, being one of the greatest joys in life. And it's really interesting, and it just made me think. I know I started out at the beginning of this evening talking about the fact, you know, that my original teaching certification is in physical education. and just the absolute joy in movement and being in the moment, whether that, you know, whatever that is, whether it's through sports or dance or anything of that nature. And really, I loved that job and blending that part of learning, you know, with the cognitive development as well. And I see that. One of the things that I think that when I was in the classroom, which was a long time ago, is trying to bring kind of that enthusiasm and the joy for teaching just in general. And I think to really love what you do and modeling that. And I don't think that it's any one thing. I think everything has to come together in terms of what you bring to create that climate of learning in which students just feel safe to take a risk. Because once students feel safe with you and they trust you, then that is when we begin to see them begin to take those risks and kind of do the things that we're asking them to do in the classroom. And I think it is possible to digress from really some structured standard teaching. And this is not to say, I mean, there's a role for everything, right? Everyone in my class knows that, you know, these instructional decisions that we make is what are we doing at a particular time? What's the purpose for that? Because sometimes there is a need for that direct, explicit instruction. And then there's some time for just that sheer joy of learning and figuring out how to balance that in your classroom through an atmosphere, you know, of trust. I mean, there's research out there, we call it teacher credibility, right? Some of you have heard about that. We talk about teacher credibility. And the single largest contributing factor is when to the credibility is trust. When students trust the teacher, that is a larger mediator of student achievement than SES, which can blow your mind when you think about it. So when we create that environment where students feel safe and they trust us, you know, that allows us to kind of push the envelope in terms of how we create joy in learning in our classroom. And I think that's very individual. Nobody's going to do it the same way. We're not the same educator. We don't have the same passions. We don't engage with our students in the same way. And I think that's the inherent beauty of teaching, is that variability that every educator brings in there. But I think it all comes back to that that classroom environment and the trust that we build up. So we can, as I said, you know, just, you know, leaving it there is that allows us to bring the joy back into learning.
Nancy, you mentioned this. It's essentially like each teacher's craft or your style. We all have a unique teaching style, and that's where you bring that passion and joy and seeing where your students are and where you want them to go. And it's interesting because I think your question and your statement is multi-layered. You also touched on the fact of being dyslexic. So for our students with disabilities, we know that many times their learning experience hasn't been the best, or it's a challenge, so they learn differently. So really acknowledging that and supporting them. My counterpart was my co-teacher, Dr. Calzada, and although I was the general education teacher, we worked together to help assist those students. She would be pulling a small group or leading the entire whole group instruction, and I would support her students or the students with IEPs in order to make sure that they were successful. And regarding the standards, good teaching is good teaching. The standards will always change. For example, our students didn't take the state test this year, but without the standards, we wouldn't have you know, a guide or a map of what they need to learn. However, our goal is for them to be successful, lifelong learners. So going back to the essential things, being able to write clearly, to think analytically, to speak, to analyze and question. So all of those foundational skills will help them to be successful. It's not a state test. We want them to open their own businesses. We want them to find cures to diseases. So we have to look at it on a larger scale, not just a test. A test doesn't determine where our students will be.
And the counterpart of my question is I've also noticed how consuming the field of education is, right? My wife was a first and second grade teacher in the San Francisco school district for many years, right? And I would go into the classroom with her and support her, you know, in a diversity of ways. And I noticed the countless hours and the limitation of resources, right? Sometimes she putting out of her pocket resources to facilitate the instruction she believed her students deserved. And and then this was a dual immersion program. So there were students from very different paths, right? That, you know, some spoke one language, some spoke another language. It was a very interesting process. And on one side, you see the need for full investment into the student experience and keeping that, you know, passion for learning alive and doing everything you can to scaffold the student growth and development. On the other, you have this very strong need for sustainability, right? And you know, how do you turn your educational efforts into something that is dynamic and powerful, but not sacrificial along the process, right? And I always remember what they tell you when you get on a plane, right? If we drop the oxygen masks, put yours first, because you're not going to help anyone if you pass out, right? So take care of yourself. So what are the things that you could share with students in terms of, I mean, with that intrinsic passion that is so moving to see in teachers across the educational system, right? Trying to facilitate that magical experience for students. How do you take care of yourselves? What do you do to ensure that sustainability and that ability to continue going and helping your students grow?
I was just having this conversation with one of my colleagues the other day. We both started last year, and I was like, you're here before me when I pull in at 7:30, and you're here well after me at 5:30. Like, I don't know how you do it. And we're just two different people in that aspect. When I am allowed to leave, I leave school. That doesn't mean I don't come home and do things that I have to, but I come home and I have my own routine of taking care of myself first, because, you know, the saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. If I'm not showing up, you know, we said earlier, the kids expect us to be 100%. They're looking at us. So if you're not 100%, they're feeding off of that, especially now when they're looking up to you so much in the time of need. So fostering what you need and your passions outside of this classroom is so, so, so important. Having that outlet and having other people to talk to is just a really important piece of it. And not trying to keep going, because you will burn yourself out. You need to, at some point, say, okay, it is 7 o'clock. I need to turn off my computer right now and stop working. And you know what? Some nights it's very hard. You're still laying in bed thinking about that one kid who you just need that one extra little thing, and you're trying to figure out what it is. And you will have those dreams and everything, but there comes a point that you need to just take time for yourself and say, okay, I need to, you know, go for a walk. I need to do whatever passion you have, to just decompress a bit.
That was beautiful, Lauren. I'm also thinking teachers have to love themselves as much as they love their students. I think that's what it comes down to, is that all of the everything that we bestow about ourselves on our students is just thinking about that teachers are just as deserving of that. And, you know, cutting yourself a break, as Lauren said.
And like Lauren said, everyone's different. So I'm the person that gets to work at 5 in the morning and probably doesn't leave until 7 o'clock at night. But that works for me. And I tell my colleagues, the people that I manage and the people above me, that that is my system. And because when I go home, I go home. I don't want to go home and do work. But just like Lauren said, she likes to go home and do work. And that's totally fine. And you have to find that balance, and you have to know that, because it's just so important. And you have to know when to take a step back, you know, because everyone reaches a point where they are becoming not useful anymore, and not in a bad way, but just in a like need a mental break way. And you just need to, you'll learn that through the beginning stages of your career and when you know, step outside of school. And when you do know that, you know, listen to yourself, listen to your body, and build relationships with your manager and boss, you know, so you can say like, hey, I can't do this right now because I just need a few hours or a few days of break. And that's very important and critical to keeping yourself full, to keep using the cup metaphor, because education is extremely demanding, and it's only getting more demanding as each day passes in this pandemic, because now the pressure is, when are we going to open back up our schools, and when are we going to start transitioning students back? You know, and you know, it's much easier to say fully virtual than it is to say some hybrid, some virtual, some traditional. So, you know, it's only going to get more demanding.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to add quickly, I saw in the chat that it said boundaries are necessary, especially in a space where our space is at home. If you are working at home, you are always at work. Back in March, I was in front of my computer all day, all night. I was waiting for emails, and I felt that when an email came through, I had to answer that email because parents were home, they were there with their kids, and I was the one to help them. And I didn't do that while we were in school. So even now, parents and caregivers are putting that pressure on to answer right away. It's the age of technology. We're all virtual. It's answer right away type thing. So definitely setting those boundaries because we're always on.
Yeah, I agree. And everyone touched on this, but having a critical friends group, so a core group of individuals that you can go to, because you can't do this work alone. You have to ask for help. You have to reach out and have someone positive, because there are days where the job feels impossible. It feels like, how am I going to get my students to where I need them to be? But you have to surround yourselves with individuals that will lift you up in those times of need. Listen, I'm struggling with this. Can you watch this lesson? How would you teach this? Can you watch me teach really quickly? I'm going to send this to you. Do you have this resource? So having individuals that will help you to become a better teacher, people that will lift you up when you're weak, and returning that as well. Sometimes it's, you know, creating, going on Twitter and looking at what other teachers are posting and say, oh, that's such a great idea. I can use that for my lesson on theme. So being able to share and network and work with other people will help you to improve your practice and get through. Take it a day at a time and just enjoy it, because children are amazing and they will teach you, and be open. Sometimes lessons, you bomb that lesson and you say, you know what, that didn't go so well. But you know what, tomorrow's going to be a better day. I'm going to try it again. Let me think, how can I do this differently? And just being kind to yourself. So it's not perfect, but you're an educator. You're a superhero.
That's great, Sean. Yeah, I agree. Having a support system is so important. That's wonderful. I'm glad you said that.
I just had one more thing I want to add. I know it looks like we're at time, but just going off of this question, knowing somewhat your boundaries a little bit going into when you're looking for a job. Some districts expect they have different expectations of you. So if you feel that the expectations are going to be too much, you want a little bit of a push, just have that in your mind, and have that as a question to ask during your interviews of what's expected of you as an educator. I asked that at a lot of my interviews, and some of them I was just like, I don't know if I would fit in here with my beliefs about what education is or what I think I need to do as an educator. So just having that in the back of your mind is really important. Even if you're not totally sure yet, just thinking about it a little bit before.
Wow, thank you, everyone. I don't know, you would like us to close the panel?
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Daniel, you were kind of breaking up, so I just jumped in. Guys, thank you, my panelists, for being here and taking your time, especially Dylan on your birthday night. But I was totally impressed with tonight and everything that you talked about, and I'm just so happy to hear everything, and great to see everybody again, because Sean and everybody, good luck with everything. And again, thank you everybody for attending also. Daniel?
You were all fantastic. Thank you so much, Dawn. Thank you, every panelist. Thank you, every participant. This has been a wonderful night. Remember that we have recorded it, so this will be available for consumption. Remember that we have a communities fair, a launch communities fair on October 23rd, if you'd like to join. And we have, 10 more panels going on this term. So you want to join any of those, you're welcome to do that. Now you know where to find us. So thank you very much. We're really appreciative of your time, and happy birthday, Dylan.
Happy birthday, Dylan. Thanks, everyone.
Birthday. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Good to see you. Hi, Nance.
Yay. All right. That was nice. Thanks.
Thank you. You were awesome.
Thanks.
Thank
Nance.
you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Don. That was fantastic.
No, it went well, right?
You
I
did
think-
fantastically, and they were amazing.
They were.
Yeah.
They were very
Well,
engaged.
actually, let me stop recording.
Oh, yeah.